Hey, you Miller Beach bums, Etna heads, and other region rats. It's Thursday, May 6th, 2021. Time for another episode of the Miller Beach Podcast. You better freaking listen or watch. And take off those stupid masks. You're in your house.
Our high school was 1 mile from the beach.
Sicilian Inn was where everyone hung out.
These hot dogs, the best in the world. High school class of 77 was definitely
my first rock concert was the Hammond Civic Center.
You can't be from Miller Beach if you don't know what the BAB is.
And now, broadcasting to Miller Beach and around the world. You're listening to the Miller Beach Podcast with Wirt, class of 77 grad, Michael Joyner.
Hey folks, Miller Beach Podcast episode 5. Thank you so much for all your faithful listening. This is turning out as good as I had hoped, okay? I mean, I really had high hopes for it, and sure enough, people are enjoying it. They enjoyed, I hope you enjoyed our first ever video podcast last week when I had my best buddy from high school, Jeff Trathen, on the show. And it's funny, at the last second, I said, Jeff, let's turn on the video cameras. And boy, did it make a difference. Now, today, I'm going to be solo. And it's not going to really be any difference. I'm not going to add stuff that I know of unless I think about it later. But I'm not going to necessarily add pictures and all this. I'm not going to have any guests. So whether you listen or whether you watch, it's up to you. But it's going to be pretty much the same podcast, okay? Just telling you that right now. I think every other podcast, I'll videotape me and a guest and put the crazy graphics and all that stuff, all right? But for now, just me. And we're going to talk about the 60s. I get a lot of folks saying, hey, man, we graduated in the 60s. We went to Wirt in the 60s. You're going to talk about us? Are you? Huh? Yeah, how about now? Because the 60s were a great time to grow up. I grew up in the 60s. I graduated in the late 70s, but I grew up in the 60s, and certainly, especially compared to this incredibly crazy climate we're living in right now, folks, the 60s, man, was heaven, man. We had Ray Rayner, the 69 Cubs, Hard Rock Coco and Joe. For Christmas, we had family classics. That's what made me want to become an actor. So many great 60s memories. And I'm going to talk about some of that stuff here in a minute. But before I do, a little commercial. Okay. And again, if you folks have a business of any kind in the Northwest Indiana area, especially Miller Beach, get in touch with me, man. I'd love to do an ad for you. Okay. For now, this episode is brought to you by my agent, actually, comedianbooker.com. The most talented comedians on the planet, and me. We're all on there. Every comedian, every bit of talent, every performer has at least 20 years experience. We've been on Dry Bar Comedy, Comedy Central, all the talk shows, okay? So if you need a professional comedian, please check out comedianbooker.com. And by the way, folks, man, let's get the comedy back. We need to laugh again. Remember when we used to laugh together? My goodness. As a comedian, they closed all the comedy stages. I think performers have suffered more than anybody in so many ways because we lost all of our work. Acting, filmmaking stopped. So I'm glad to see the country's opening up. I'm starting to get some gigs. If you have a bar or a bar mitzvah, if you have a corporate meeting, whatever, anything at all, church, give us a call, give my agent a call, and try to book Michael Joyner. I'm at michaeljoyner.com, by the way. Try to book me for your event. I guarantee we'll have a good old time, all right? Let's get the country laughing again. We need to laugh. We really do. All right, here we go. And what I want you to do, not only on this episode, after you watch this episode or listen to it, but go to the Miller Beach Facebook page after every episode and post your thoughts and memories about the theme. Keep it in line with the theme, okay? I want to keep this as organized as possible. That kind of makes it fun. So after today's episode, if you think, oh man, I wish I would have called in and told Mike about this, well, post it on the page and maybe I'll read it in the future. So we are going to talk about the 60s, folks. I'm excited. How about you? Okay, I'll wait for you to text me. Are you excited? I know I am. I get excited easily. Okay. We're going to talk about the 60s. We did not realize how good we had it, did we? especially compared to today's environment, folks. I mean, let's start with the music. I mean, remember the music of the 60s? There was no agenda except to make a great story in 3.5 minutes or less. It touched your heart, usually about a boy and a girl falling in love. And we were approaching the 70s, which made way for the two greatest eras in all of music, and especially rock music, the 70s and 80s, which I'm going to talk about very specifically and in detail this summer on some upcoming episodes. I have some great guests for that. But for now, folks, I got to tell you, this crap they play today, hate to sound like my grandpa, it's crap compared to what we had in the 70s and 80s, 60s. They're not going to be listening to it 5, 10, 20 years from now like they do our music. They won't. I hardly want to listen to it for 1 second. They're not. Kids, you need to reacquaint yourself. And my kids have already. I'm so happy. I'm proud of them. I didn't even have to provoke it. They just discovered the Beatles and the Stones and Ted Nugent and all the Foghat. They discovered all of them on their own. Jethro Tull. Okay? But we will not be listening to today's music like we do the Beatles. Still as fresh today as they ever were. Now, here's the thing. Let me tell you a little story about the Beatles. I was on this... you might have grown up in the 60s and 70s page on Facebook. I was just kind of watching. I wasn't really posting much. I would see what they'd talk about now and then. And recently, oh my gosh, I want to kill somebody. Recently, I went on there and someone posted a question. Tell me, in your opinion, who you think is the most overrated band of the 60s and 70s. Oh, man. I just knew it was going to be my last day there because sure enough, I went on there and a couple of complete dummies said the Beatles. The Beatles, overrated. You are a numbskull. That's not negotiable. Okay? There's some bands, well, did you like them? Bachman Turner Overdrive? I didn't. You did? Okay, whatever. Not the Beatles, greatest band in history. There'll never be another one like them. And if you don't realize that and in fact think they're overrated, you have no right to ever post your opinion on a page about music. And I mean that sincerely. All right. I mean that in a Christian way. You're dumb. So anyway, I'm going to save the specifics about the music of the 70s and 80s, songs and bands of the 70s and 80s for a very near future segment on music. But man, I still listen to it now when I go into Planet Fitness. That's all I put on, 70s and 80s. Oh man, I can listen to it over and over. Thank God for Spotify. Brought to you by Spotify. That was a free ad, Spotify. Send me some money. Go to my PayPal. Oh, I can't wait for the segment on music. Anyway, the 60s brought in the greatest era ever. 60s were great. Not as great as the 70s and 80s, in my opinion. However, still great. Wholesome compared to the crap we have today. Oh, my gosh. I can't even talk. I sound like my grandpa, but you know what? Maybe grandpa was right. Okay, so let's talk about where we're going to go. 69 Cubs, the 1969 Cubs. I was living in Gary, Indiana. My cousin Ray, who was my age, thank God for him. What a godsend. My best buddy at the time. And pretty much all my life. He was in Tinley Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, and this messed up Gary, Indiana kid would go visit. When I say visit, I would stay months at a time, and thank God I did. I don't know how I would have turned out if I had to stay home in Gary. Nothing against my mom, but my stepdad. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So eventually I played Little League with his dad was the coach, and we were very close. So I stayed there almost every summer till I was, 14, from age 7 to 14. Summers were when they picked me up, I stayed there. Also Christmas time for my 2-week school vacation. But in the summer, we did nothing but, on the day there was a game, and there was almost a game every day, watch the 69 Cubs. Or whatever year it was, but in 69 I specifically remember, because that's when they almost did it, folks. And we knew the name of every player. Of course, his mom and dad gave us this little black and white TV. That's what we watched. We had how many stations? Channel 2, 7, 9, 32 for UHF, 11 for public service. I can't believe I remember this stuff. 5, we had Channel 5. Cubs were on WGN Channel 9. And the parents, my cousin's parents, my aunt and uncle, gave us a little TV. And we had a little rec room, and we watched it. We didn't miss one pitch. We knew everyone's name. We knew everyone's batting average. Manager Leo DeRocher, Ron Santo, Billy Williams, Glenn Becker. We memorized all of them. Don Kessinger, Ernie Banks, with the way he held the bat, okay? Randy Huntley, the catcher. They didn't change, folks, from year to year like they do today. Offer me more money, I'm going to go to this. Oh, these friggin' people today, these sports figures, they're nothing like. There's a few. I love Mahomes. I'm in Kansas City now, but that's football. Let me take a sip here. If you're listening, that's lemonade. We knew everything about those Cubs, man. And I'll tell you, when my Uncle Bro, that was my cousin Ray's dad, who, thank God for him, he was like a surrogate father for me. A father who actually worked and provided for his family, with all due respect to my stepdad who didn't. When he took me to my very first Cubs game, me and my cousin Ray, this little boy's heart skipped a beat or two. I mean, I remember seeing Ernie Banks hundreds of times on TV, but what it did to me when I saw him, and I couldn't wait for him to grab the bat to see if he really held, and sure enough, he did that little Ernie Banks thing that he does. Oh, man, folks, it's not like today. Today, I don't know, baseball games don't do that for you, especially with the crazy COVID crap and nobody sitting in the seats. But we had players, folks. We had Willie Mays. No steroids. Willie McCovey, Boo Powell. I remember seeing Juan Marichal. If you don't know who he is, look him up, man. He kicked way over his head. He was a pitcher. I remember seeing him for the first time against the Cubs, that wind-up, that fastball, that, what was it, 100 miles an hour? I memorized it. I imitated it as one who was a pitcher myself. Okay? I've seen him do it 100 times. And then Ron Santo, after every game that the Cubs won, ran into the outfield and kicked his heels, folks. We had the bleacher bums back then. We had Harry Carey and Jack. First, there was Jack Brickhouse as the announcer, then Harry Carey. Both of them so great. As you know, Harry Carey became an icon. But and we thought those days would last forever. It was a great time to be alive, folks. That was the 60s. That was the 60s, okay? And anyway, stop and think about the purity of the 60s, folks. America should have never changed from that, Father. The wholesomeness, that love of country, the respect of parents and law enforcement and those in authority and teachers, and the love of our fellow man and the unity. Remember the unity? The last time I remember real unity was when Kennedy was shot. Folks, he was a Democrat. But the day he was shot, all Americans cried out in unity. We cried. We grieved. That doesn't happen today. Oh, I shudder to think. So we need to get back to that. So, because none of us wins if the other side wins. We only win when there's unity because, folks, we have enemies watching us. Oh, yes. They would love to win the prize of the greatest country in history, the United States of America. And there's never a better time to attack than when we're not in unity. Okay. Now let me get back to Miller Beach in the 60s. All right. I just wanted to say that. Okay. It was a great time. Stop and think about it. Think about it. Man, nobody said, did you vote for him? No, that was our president. And somebody assassinated him. And we grieved together. Oh, man. God, get us back to that, please. Okay. So, how about this? Anybody remember Frazier Thomas? Family Classics with Frazier Thomas. Oh, my gosh. When I heard the music, here's what I want you to do. Stop right now. Pause this. Go to YouTube. Look up Family Classics with Frazier Thomas. And just let him Let that music, that beginning music play. What did it do to you? I know what it did to me. I knew I was about to watch a beautiful, wonderful, told story hosted by a man who loved good stories. Did you know he edited some of that stuff so that it was more family friendly? Imagine that, having to edit something to be more family friendly in the 60s, but he did it. Frazier Thomas, such wholesomeness. But my heart skipped a beat whenever I would hear that music, and I couldn't wait to see, because we didn't necessarily know what the next story was going to be. Maybe they announced it the week before. I don't know if they did, but I would wait to see, and I couldn't wait because I had a few of my favorite stories that I wanted to see. Huck Finn was one of them. Anything with Mickey Rooney, Boys Town especially. Oh my gosh. After Boys Town was over, I would go in my room, close the door, and act out the entire movie. But this time, I was the starring role in the Mickey Rooney role. That was me. Oh, I cried and cried. How about Tobor the Great? Do you remember the premise? A little boy who found out this robot of the future, I guess, had feelings, was capable of feelings, but like man does, they didn't let that last very long. Beautiful story. Tobor the Great. Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, so many great stories. Now, when I was looking this up, I went on YouTube like I just told you to do, and I see that some of the Family Classics episodes are on there, and they're actually trying to raise money so that they don't lose those the copies of those, because back then it was filmed. So check that out. I would give to that cause, absolutely. What else comes to mind when I think of the 60s? Parades in Gary, Indiana. Now, that's not Miller Beach, and I'm sure you had parades in Miller Beach, but Gary, Indiana, the reason it's important to bring up the fact that we had parades down Broadway is because Gary has become such a, so much poverty, so much crime. It's become a slum. Even the people on the Gary, Indiana pages, they know that. I'm not putting down my hometown where I was born. I love it, but it's not what it used to be. We used to have parades with astronauts, and everyone would show up. Black, white, Mexican, everybody showed up. By the way, I played Little League, 1970 Elks Little League in Gary, and the picture is me. I was a pitcher, a black guy. Oh, I forgot his name. Great player. And the rest was all Mexican and Cuban and Spanish. My little 4'11" coach. Oh, I love him. I wish I remembered his name. I hope he's probably not, but if he's still alive, I'd love to see him. I used to go to his house before the game. I was the star pitcher, and we won the World Series that year. I would go to his house. His family would be eating. I remember one day I saw him eating a pepper. And he said, "You want to try one?" And it was a hot pepper. And he laughed and laughed when I couldn't eat that thing and needed some water. But I probably should keep some of these thoughts to myself. To you, they mean nothing, but to me, they do. But I was on that team with almost all Latinos and a black guy, and nobody ever, if we mentioned race, we just joked about it, okay? Nobody cared. We loved each other. Wieners Obregon, if you know who he is, he was my star shortstop. Man, he was good. I knew when that ball went to Wieners, we were going to get an out, and we did. He helped me pitch a no-hitter because he was so good, saved a couple of balls. If you know a guy who's nicknamed Wieners Obregon from Gary, tell him Michael Joyner's looking for him. I'd love to see him. Man. Okay. So we had parades. I went sledding in Gleason Park. Remember sledding at all? They don't do it anymore. I don't know why. Folks, I remember when winter came, we went sledding. We would find a hill. Sometimes we'd go to Illinois. We'd find a hill that went onto a frozen lake, and we would sled from 11 a.m. till it got dark. Why don't they do that anymore? What is going on? Okay, some more. WGN TV, which was the Chicago station, Channel 9, has Bozo, had Ray Rayner. I believe it had the Family Classics. Remember Bozo? I know you do, but remember Marshall Brodeen? the magician. Came out with magic cards eventually. Later on, I looked and I said, that guy is the worst magician on the planet. Ooby-dooby-dooby-dooby-doo. He is terrible. Oh my gosh. I don't know if it was by design. He was terrible, but he was one of the clown magicians on Bozo. And for some reason, he came up. I'm going to have to look these people up on YouTube. So those are just a few things that I remember about the 60s. Now, there were some, personal things. I didn't live in Miller Beach myself until 7th grade Kennedy King, and that was 70-something. But in the 60s, I was in Gary, Indiana. Okay. And I'll say this, here's one thing I remember. We were very poor. We were always very poor. It was just me and my mother for the longest time, and we would take the city bus everywhere. And whenever we took it to Miller Beach, talk about a little boy's heart skipping a beat. You'd go towards the beach on whatever street that was. I don't know if it was Lake. No, it couldn't have been Lake Street, whatever it was. And we'd go up a hill, and then I'd start to see the blue outline of what to me was like the ocean. But it was just Lake Michigan. But as you know, very huge. And that's when my heart would kind of, oh man, we're going to the beach. And back then the beach was clean. We had the bathhouse. Everybody went and had fun and sunny. It was like California. And that's what I remember about Miller Beach. That was my first experience with Miller Beach. And then eventually we moved to Etna. But I will say this. Let me give a little shout out to my cousin Ray, who still lives in the Tinley Park, Mokina, New Lenox area. I go visit them. If you know me on Facebook, I say I'm visiting my Chicago family. That's who I'm talking about. We're as close as can be. They're more like immediate family than cousins. My Aunt Maud and everybody. But when I used to visit him, every time cousin Ray, he came from a wholesome family that they raised him right. But every time cousin Mike came to visit from Gary was when Ray got in trouble. That was the common denominator. When he got caught smoking, it was cousin Mike. When he got caught stealing stuff from the store, that was cousin Mike. Other things was cousin Mike. And I remember his Catholic school would have a policy that allowed them to bring visitors now and then. And once or twice he brought me to his school when I believe he was in 5th or 6th grade, and introduced me as his cousin Mike from Gary. And boy, I've been in movies and I've been a comedian but nobody looked at me like I was a celebrity like that class when Ray said he's from Gary. Oh, has he been to prison? Is he tough? And I acted tough because that's what they expected. So I just put on this persona whenever I visited, and I could see the girls kind of looking. These are Catholic girls, and the guys are like, hey, how you doing, man? Watch out, he'll beat you up if you say the wrong thing. Of course, I was not at all like that. But Ray's cousin Mike from Gary's visiting today. Because back then, we had a reputation about Gary. If you're from a nice little town in Illinois and Gary's 30 miles that way, you heard about it. And now you got a chance to meet somebody from there. But I think I might have lit up a cigarette in front of him and coughed myself silly. And that the gig was up. Anyway, a couple more things I just now thought of before we get out of here. How about the Goodfellow singers? Remember the Goodfellow singers? Oh man, they were kind of like an Elks Lodge. They would come to our school during Christmas, and they all wore these top hats in these long 1800s style jacket and pants, and everyone was a big, bright, different color. You had a guy wearing yellow, purple, green, black, whatever, and they sang Christmas songs. And when I mean Christmas songs, I mean real Christmas songs. They weren't worried about offending anybody because Christmas actually mentioned the birth of Christ. And my heart would just be, I didn't realize it then, but I think it was God trying to touch my heart and saying, hey, man, this is the answer you're looking for. But all I know is it made me feel so good. And Christmas couldn't officially start for me until we saw the Goodfellow singers, man. It was so beautiful. Now, later on, when I was went to Riley School, I went to many schools, again, because my dad could not keep down a job. But I lived in Glen Park at this time in this one house on the second story of this duplex. I don't believe anyone lived in the bottom. But somehow my parents got up the money to send me to Goodfellow camp. And I was very excited. I went to camp. A lot of funny things happened there. We went to McCormick State Park in southern Indiana. To me, that was a long trip away. Came back home, and the guy who was supposed to give me a ride home, true story, brought me to the address, and he said, are you sure this is it, Mike? Because this house is burned down. I looked out the window, and I said, yeah, that's my house. Well, my dad had burned down the house, my stepdad, smoking, I guess. Smoking who knows what. And back then, I don't even know if we had a phone. So nobody bothered to tell me or anybody the house is burned down. So don't drop Mike off over there. I don't even remember how I think I told him where my grandmother lived on my stepdad's side. And we made it through. But I have so many stories like that. And I'm sure many people in Gary do. We grew up poor, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, man, because you just really learn character that way. I really think that. Anyway, you guys have been fantastic. As always, I assume you have been. If you've listened this far, you've been fantastic. I'll have a guest, Lord willing, at the next podcast, and we'll continue to videotape them, and it'll be lots of fun. And I think very soon, sometime before the Miller Beach reunion, I hope to see a lot of friends there at the Miller Beach reunion. Sometime before that, we're going to do a segment on music of the 70s and 80s, and it's going to be really informative. I have a DJ, Ken Vella, a good friend of mine that I want to get on the show, Jeff Trathen and Michael Gajardo, two guys that I was in bands with as a drummer. So all musicians who understand music will be as guests. I'll have as guests on those shows, and they're going to be really fun and informative, and we'll tell some fun stories. Okay, I almost always end. I'll end with a Jeff Trathen funny story. I always do. This is kind of a Mike Joyner funny story that involves Jeff Trathen. Jeff and I were best friends in high school. At this time, I had moved from 1118 Fayette Street to 1300 Dearborn Street with my mom and two stepsisters. And I had a bedroom of my own, and Jeff used to walk in and out whenever he wanted to because he was my best buddy. So Jeff had lent me $20. And a few weeks later, he calls me up. He says, hey, man, I could really use that $20. Can I get it back from you? I said, sure thing, man. And I got this crazy idea. I said, but I won't be home, Jeff. I'll leave it in my bedroom. Just walk on back there and go ahead and get the $20. He said, okay. So what I did was I hid in the closet. And when Jeff showed up, there was a bag taped to my bedroom door. And I had written on the bag, for your $20, look up elephant rocks in the encyclopedia. I had a set of encyclopedias. And I hear Jeff cussing. And so he looks up elephant rocks. And on that page, I put in a little note that said, now look up the Grand Canyon, or whatever, something crazy. Now he's really cussing. I can't say what he said. So he looks that up. And on the Grand Canyon page, it said, now look up, and it did it about 4 or 5 times. Finally, on the last one, I wrote, the money's in the bag. He really cussed. He doesn't know I'm in the closet. And he grabs the bag and takes the $20 out and he starts to leave. I said, hey, man. He was not happy to see me that day for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, that's it, folks. That's all we have time for. You've been fantastic. I'm Michael Joyner. Don't forget to go to michaeljoyner.com/podcast. There's a whole bunch of fun links on there. If you want to help in any way, please do. And tell all your friends about the podcast. Please share it. Please go to the Miller Beach Podcast with Michael Joyner Facebook page and let me know your thoughts about this episode, your experiences of the 60s. And we will see you next time, man. It's getting warm outside, so hope to see you guys walking around and all that stuff. And don't forget, I'm going to be getting together with some very close friends. A lot of people can't go to the friends of mine cannot go to the Wirt reunion, so we're going to get together at Quicker Steak and Lube. That's our place to always get together, right over there in Portage, and the night before. So I'm hoping that I get to see a lot of people that will not be at the reunion, or maybe just a few that will be at the reunion, but you're looking for something to do that night, and I haven't seen you in a long time. We're getting old, folks. This could be the last time, and this is sincere. This could be the last time you see somebody that you have fond feelings for or fond memories of. So if you can get over there that weekend, do your best to. I hope to see you, okay? I hope to see a lot of people. All right. I'm Michael Joyner. You've been fantastic. God bless you. See you next time. Bye-bye.